I mean, one of the challenges, there's several, isn't there? And straight off the back of the year we've had, a challenge, of course, is how we rebuild, how we recalibrate after COVID-19 and what that looks like. But that aside, that brings the challenges of economic situations for churches. But before that, in that, and even now, we've got a huge digital challenge ahead of us. How do we not just equip the church as it is, but how do we reach out to totally new generations for the gospel? How do we encourage more younger people into active fellowship, active faith, being Jesus's hands and feet in our community? We have the challenge of the justice issues that are staring us boldly in our face. Climate changes, justice issues around Black Lives Matter, women in ministry, equal treatment for every one of God's people. These are huge challenges that we face ahead of us in the 2020s.
For me, the challenges that we face today are very similar to the challenges that we've been facing for probably over 100 years, which is basically about shrinkage. We have a denomination, it's not unusual, but we have a denomination that is getting smaller. We have year on year, we have fewer churches. And those churches that we do have are getting smaller. And that's a real problem. When I was in Derbyshire, we did a study of I think there's about 26 churches that were part of our structure. And of those, 2/3 had membership of 30 or less. And that created all sorts of problems for them in terms of affordability of ministry. And that was, must have been 15 years ago when we did that study. So the statistics will have changed adversely since then. So these are the problems that we're facing, that year on year we are getting smaller as a denomination, and our churches are getting smaller as well. And one of the challenges that generates is about affordability of ministry, because as churches get smaller, then the income base gets smaller and fewer churches can afford ministry. So I think going forward, one of the challenges for us is how we address that. How we help ministry happen in churches that can't afford ministry. I think in some ways we have to try and find some creative solutions to address that. Andrew Dodd is a classic example of someone who has done this bivocational tent making ministry, which has been a superb model there in Hawkshead. And I think that model is something that we can develop and look at as we go forward as well. So that to me is the biggest issue that we face as a denomination, that of shrinkage, and how we can address that, how we can try and turn that corner and help each of our churches start to grow again, even if it's only by a little bit. But that, I think, is the challenge that we face.
I think I'd like to start by saying that Jesus and the message of Jesus is still alive and 100% relevant. And I think we have a society which is hungry for that message, even though people probably don't put it in those terms. I think society is tired of the old mantras and is seeking genuine expressions of faith, which are full of integrity and relationship and a sense of belonging. And I think some of what we've experienced in the pandemic would bear this out. However, I now don't want to sound too negative, but there are some real challenges which face us as a Baptist family, aren't there? Firstly, the aging demographic of our churches, and that's not just small churches. Our larger churches have a high proportion of, dare I say, the over 60s, which does include me. And this is a threat to our family moving forward. And then the traditional way that ministry has been funded through church giving. And I mention that because here in the Eastern Baptist Association, we have about a dozen really exciting pioneer ministries going on. But how are they funded? The traditional church model of funding just doesn't work. And we want to encourage this creativity for the future. But how do we maintain that and ensure that it's well supported? And then there are challenges of our disagreement on certain aspects of theological interpretation, for example, around LGBT welcome in our churches, and still ongoing difficulties of recognising women as ministers. Can we actually remain Baptist together, our movement, our family, and model what it means to journey together while genuinely holding difference? I believe we can, but I think it's challenging. And then we need exciting, creative, diverse leaders to be birthed in our movement. Our current pathways to ministry can be a bit of a nightmare to negotiate and to come to fruition with the calling that you believe you have. And we are potentially losing some of what we would call Generation X, no, Z, we've moved on, and millennials to other denominations because the pathway is easier. And frankly, those of a more youthful generation, let's say, perhaps aren't as denominationally minded. Why be a Baptist? These are just questions we need to ask. And then finally, of course, in the last 12 months, there's a massive digital revolution going on. That's an exciting challenge for us, but a challenge nonetheless. So just a few challenges there, which I hope don't sound too negative.
Okay, I think we have to start with COVID-19, don't we? Because the sense in which this has changed so much for everyone, everywhere. And we as a Baptist family are caught up in the consequences which face us all. Issues which we will be living with for many years to come, such as mental health, finance, trauma, bereavement, the effect on children and young people, and so on. The challenge is, how can we best care for each other?
And I think there are issues of sustainability, financial pressures, particularly. Many churches cannot support stipendiary ministry. How are we going to support ministry across the whole Baptist family? Can we expand and support, for example, bivocational ministry, something which has supported Hawkshead Hill Chapel and our ministry for some 30 years? How can we support ministry generally?
And then there's the challenge with regard to the nature of church life. Again, so much has changed in the way we express our corporate lives. We'll want to consider what to let go of, what to keep hold of, and what to take up for the first time. The challenge is to find a way of being that isn't a burden, in which the demands of church life don't suppress the life of the church. For some of us, lockdowns and the use of media platforms have brought the blessing of putting us in contact with people in our local communities and wider afield. The challenge is how to maintain these contacts.
And identity. We welcome many people into the Baptist family from very diverse backgrounds, and many of whom do not immediately identify as Baptist. So how do we assert and pass on our Baptist values now and to the next generation?
I think the hope for me is based on the local Baptist church. And it seems to me that we have a resource which is that local congregation of God's people. And when that congregation come together, then things can happen. When we believe, then things can happen and things can change. If I take a scenario, for example, a church with, say, 20 members, that they may say, oh, we've only got 20 members. But when you go back to the start of that church in the 1800s, they probably had 10 members, maybe 20 members. And at that time, they had confidence, they had faith, they had belief that things could turn around. And if we today look at that same scenario, if we have, say, 20 members in our church, if we can say, well, yes, we've got 20 people, we've got 20 members, we can be a believing community, we can see things happen, we can see God do things with us. So if we recognize that our local churches are that precious resource, that believing people can help to generate change, then I think we found the key, the solution to taking things forward. It rests in that local congregation and the power that there is there to believe and see things happen. If I could throw in as well, for me, one of the great hopes for our denomination, and this is why I think I'm so impressed with our family, is this thing we call home mission. Because home mission has made so many things happen over the years, so many mission opportunities, so many ministries happen. And it's a precious resource. We do a superb job as a Baptist family in generating so much income each year through home mission. And if we can develop that resource and find ways of channeling that creatively as well, then that's another source of hope, I think, for the years to come.
As a Baptist family, we enjoy a personal relationship with God, and it's in our DNA to share Jesus with others. We understand that God gives each of us. We're a people of action who love to help others and to be involved in our local communities. This season has unsettled us in a good way, helping us to let go of what is unhelpful and recognise what really matters. I believe that it has shaken us up so that we are more ready to listen to God, to see the new thing that God is doing, to go where God leads.
We are a diverse people. There are different expressions of church which have developed in recent years, such as community churches meeting at different times in different places, meeting different needs. And within our way of being a Baptist family, we have a freedom to adapt with the independence of the local congregation.
And we're blessed with the quality of the resources available in the Baptist family. We think of our core leadership team, the Baptist Together magazine, the BMS resources, and also the support and resources offered at association level. All these bring hope as we think about our Baptist movement.
And I think that we're viewed as an honest broker across very different forms of church. I've been president of Churches Together in Cumbria, and our engagement ecumenically is well respected, certainly across the Northwest. We have a seat at the table at a national and local level. And I think I also have hope because of the sustainability of our churches. That sustainability doesn't depend on what some would consider viability, as it might be defined. As Baptists, we're developing an expanding view of ministry, such as bivocational ministry and pioneering. Unlocking the potential within the Baptist family will build confidence in each person and help grow the church.
I think as a regional minister, I have the most amazing opportunity to see wonderful creative expressions of ministry. And it's demonstrated in so many ways. And I think this pandemic has actually brought that to the fore. I think as a Baptist family, we do have an attitude of, yes, we can do that. Yes, we will work with local agencies. Yes, we will work with other Christians. Yes, we will work together for the greater good of the kingdom of God. I see a lot of that, and it really inspires me. I also think as a Baptist movement, we have great flexibility to respond to the winds of change. I think we saw this in the manner in which we responded fast and quickly to the tensions around coronavirus and the pandemic. But more than that, I think we have the ability within our ecclesiology to run with where the Spirit is going while still retaining the truth of the gospel message. The question is, do we have the bravery to run sometimes? And the other thing that gives me hope is just seeing leadership, which is sacrificial and costly, but ministers and leaders going the extra mile for their communities and congregations and genuinely loving people. That inspires me too.
The hope for me ultimately is Jesus. And the beauty is I see Jesus in all the individual churches and members and extended people in our churches. The hope is Jesus within us. And the more passionate, the more excited we get around Jesus, there is hope that we can share in our communities. Lots of talk at the moment has been around some churches declining or dying, and there's been talk of death of church. And that is sad, but at the same time, that fills me with an immense hope. Because actually, when things die, we know that they can rise again. And so the hope is that as we lay things down, God's Holy Spirit will breathe in and rise them up to something even more beautiful and lovely and God honoring. So the hope is Jesus, his church, his followers, us, and the resurrection that he wants to bring to us as a Baptist movement.
I think the key to sharing our faith and mission has always been about growing disciples who will grow disciples. This is actually what we see throughout the book of Acts. I think the strong institutional church that grew up over the following centuries caused us to lose sight of this a little. And now more than ever, I think we need to be a movement which is all about growing disciples who grow disciples. We are the people who will reach people who are like us. The opportunity is with every one of us right now and right where we are. So having said that, the missional opportunities are endless and not dependent on clever programs or attractive church, but dependent on each one of us being equipped in our daily lives to tell our Jesus story and to capture a new vision for each one of our communities. We are the individuals that know the people around us. We are the churches that know our communities. It's about equipping every member to be the disciple they've been called to be. I guess I'm talking a lot like LICC right now, aren't I? But I think that's the message that we see clearly and strongly in the book of Acts, being disciples who grow disciples. So that, I think, is where the missional opportunity lies.
We have the great missional opportunity of providing a big welcome to all of God's created beings, of learning how to treat each other equally. That's an amazing missional opportunity to see and respect God in each other from different perspectives. I think we have an amazing missional opportunity to be gospel social influencers in our community, online and physically, influencing the world of politics, of justice, of change. There's an opportunity in mission of outdoor spaces. We've all, over the past 12 months, begun to discover God in the outdoors, even if it is just to escape from those that we live with. But what it's done is it's allowed us to realize that God's in creation, and the more we get out, the more we see God at work. And so the missional opportunities are continuing. All the great stuff in our Baptist family, from the toddler groups to the alphas to the renew well-being, but then some really cool, healthy expressions of social influencing online and beyond.
Well, in 2022, we as a nation, as communities and churches, will still be in a time of recovery and readjustment. On a personal level, our vulnerability and woundedness may provide an opportunity to connect with our friends and neighbours at a deeper level. As we share our own journey towards healing with those around us, our lives will speak of the power of the gospel and the reality of the love of God in our lives. We also hope that churches will provide safe spaces for those who are suffering from mental or emotional health issues, that churches will listen, care and offer practical support, drawing on organisations such as Christians Against Poverty and new ventures such as Renew Wellbeing We hope churches will, where helpful, work with other churches, because often more can be done together than on our own. We believe all this will provide missional opportunities as never before, as we show the love of Jesus in a tangible way.
And through the restrictions that the pandemic has brought upon us, and in a sense, the loss of structural church, that means that our homes and our daily lives, in that place, we have been challenged to be Christian people. Our homes and neighbourhoods have become even more the place where God lives through God's people, giving us the opportunity for mission. Every home has become an evangelistic hub. And we hope that new ways of being church will emerge, ways which are incarnational and organically connected to the local community, ways which will provide natural ways of sharing Jesus. Also, that the Baptist family might continue to embrace the range of Christian expression, or, as we put it, spiritual treasures of the wider church. So that, in fact, we offer various gateways to those who are searching for God. And also that we will continue together to build on the initiatives of current and past presidents.
We hope that as we walk and work with Jesus, we will discover new ways of being church which are life-giving, joy-filled and attractive.
Well, I think we've all learned in lockdown this thing called technology. And it's been an incredible thing, having to go on Zoom, Facebook services, live streaming services, whatever. We've suddenly found that we're able to reach people who we weren't able to reach before. And going forward, I'm absolutely convinced that that's going to be a tool for the churches that we need to develop. Before lockdown, we'd found that using Facebook to promote things like our Messy Church, toddler group, was hugely successful. In fact, we were turning people away because the Facebook medium had been so effective. So going forward, technology has to be part of the missional opportunities as well. But every church context is different. There are no two ways that are exactly the same, but I have been impressed with the multi-congregational model, which is being worked out in a number of churches. Osmaston Road, Derby is a good example, Derby Urban Church, where we're seeing in the one building, as it were, several congregations, diverse communities coming together under one banner, one umbrella. And that, to me, it won't work in every situation. It's not appropriate for every situation, but in certain situations, that can be a really effective tool going forward. And I think the multi-congregational model is one that has legs to take us into the next century as well.